And top of the morning, top of the week, this is We Ourselves. I'm Ambrose Eileen Sr. And, of course, that was none other than Ray Charles. Two great minds, inquiring minds, scientific minds, from two distant countries, England and America, have raised important questions about our government's official version about what really happened on 9/11 when airliners with passengers on board crashed into New York's Twin Towers. The important questions raised by them have led to many of us raising another important question, that is, was 9/11 the result of an inside job by our government or by someone connected to people at the highest levels inside our government? Over the past several months, I've been honored to have Dr. Judy Woods share with you her important scientific findings. Today, she is joined by that mind from England, Andrew Johnson. And they're both in our studios to share his views as well. My plan is to make them available for your questions today and Friday. Welcome to Dr. Judy Woods and Andrew Johnson.
Hello, thanks for having us here.
Thank you, Ambrose, for having us. It's wonderful to be here.
Why in the world, Andrew, have you come all the way from England?
I have no idea. Somebody asked me to come here, and I looked at my diary, didn't have anything booked, looked at my bank account, had the money, so I thought, I'll ask my wife if I can come, and she said, yes, you can go, so I came.
All right. When did you start to get the fascination with what had happened to the Twin Towers, and how long have you hooked up with Dr. Judy Wood?
Yeah, the first time I really thought about the question was when I saw a video, and it showed that the towers came down very, very quickly, far more quickly than would be expected with what has been called a collapse. And I used that word for a long time, probably a couple of years, to describe, how the towers actually were destroyed. But then I think it was in about September 2006, that sort of time, I was hearing about Dr. Judy Wood's research. And then, of course, as we know, and she's been on We Ourselves, I think, 6 times now, she published this research that she'd been doing, which showed that it didn't actually look like a collapse when you study the pictures in depth and look at all the other evidence associated with the videos that nearly everyone has seen at some point. There's a very great deal of other pictorial evidence that Judy has collected, and I believe at one point Judy had said she looked at thousands of pictures, and in the last sort of 2 or 3 months or so, something along those lines, we've been further studying the pictures that she's collected, and we found in many cases, or she's found I should say, and I've kind of looked over her shoulder, so to speak, that she's picked out certain pictures and wondered what certain details were caused by. For example, I know that Judy has talked about the toasted cars, things like that, and that has caused a lot of controversy on the internet, and there's been really a kind of a concerted effort, as far as we can observe, to stop people thinking about these very interesting details. And we've now sort of come to the point in the past few weeks where we where we think we've actually managed to work out what some of these issues mean in a wider context, and what the underlying technology behind these, what's caused some of these details means. And it's actually, a lot of it is to do with energy. That's one of the key questions in all of this. I think really that's what I've actually come here today to talk about. And although I'd been asked to come here, it's actually worked out very well in terms of it's a good day to come on the program and explain well, Judy's findings really. And as I say, I've really sort of looked over her shoulder and sort of chatted through a few things with her, and that's why we're here. And to sort of continue on that thread a little further, adding up these details, we believe that what we're seeing at the World Trade Center complex are the results of something that has been known to be called the Hutchison effect. And actually, the Hutchison effect is kind of a bit of a misnomer in some ways, because it's actually a collection of things that the Hutchison effect covers. And we've kind of gone through this Hutchison effect thing, which we'll talk a bit more about, and in a few minutes. And we've kind of tried to tie up basically the characteristics of the Hutchison effect, of which there are probably about 6 main ones, with the evidence that Judy has collected in the thousands and thousands of pictures that she's looked at from the various image databases that we've been pouring through, or she's been pouring through, and she's sent me some of the links, and I've been having a look at some of them. We've found that there's actually a very strong match between about 8 or 9 of the characteristics and this evidence. And again, it's very much to do with energy, and that's one of the key points I want to bring out here, is that 9/11 is very much to do with energy, as it is to do with the other topics which it's commonly associated with. And I think I mentioned that on one of the previous times that I was on. And I'd just also like to mention that this broadcast and the others which Judy and I have sort of spoken in are archived at www.weourselves.org. And I really encourage people to go onto there and access the audio files and download them, give them to your friends, and really, we want people to look at this information, really get into it, and see what they think. We really want people to think for themselves. We've tried to think for ourselves in all of this, and we want everyone else to do that. And so I think, I'm going to ask Judy now to sort of go through some of the things which we've been looking at. So if Judy could sort of start off with some of the characteristics that we've been looking at.
Well, you can look at the new series that's just gone up. It's listed at the top of my webpage in the news section under today's show, or you can go to drjudywood.com/articles/JJ, and those are both capital letters. In looking at the comparison with the various phenomena, well, I've just been collecting data over the past year and a half or so, and have found these distinct characteristics, and I've given names to them, like fuming, toasted cars. This doesn't mean that they're hot. It just means they're toast. They're history. They've been totaled. And flipped cars. There's just a variety of different discrete phenomena that I've looked at. And then looking at various details of the Hutchison effect, it's striking the similarities. Well, for example, flipped cars at the WTC. These flipped cars are sitting next to trees that are fully covered with leaves.
That's right, and when you see these pictures and you see these flipped cars, and I've seen these pictures probably for at least 6 months, and it's one of those things, there is a car that's upside down, and you just think, oh well, it's such a large amount of devastation, it just happened because of that. But when you see a flipped car in between two unflipped cars, and then as Judy has pointed out, some of the pictures have trees in the background with leaves on, and so if somebody wants to argue that it's a huge, blast as the towers were coming down, or it was a huge controlled demolition explosion, or it was a huge thermite reaction, or something of that nature, then it doesn't really wash, because the leaves are on the trees and the other two cars are the right way up. So what can cause this? Did somebody come along with a crane and lift it up? Did a team of the FDNY personnel decide, oh well, we need to flip this car upside down because we want to look at the bottom? I mean, how do you explain something like that? And when Judy and I were going through this, and it was, it's a little story of how we came onto this this Hutchison effect thing. But and I looked at this and I thought, goodness me, this is amazing. And what we actually think, although for some listeners it's going to be pretty hard to swallow, is we think this is what's called a levitation effect. And if I can just talk about that a little bit.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, because you think, oh, come on, that's crazy. But what I immediately saw when we were discussing this with Judy, and it was the aha moment, was this tied up with the Hutchison effect, because John Hutchison, I'd known about him since about 1999, that sort of time. So I'd known about him for 8 years, and he's been doing these experiments with firing beams of energy at various bits of equipment. All you need to do is just go and Google this separately onto either YouTube or the Google search engine. You'll find hundreds of pages about the Hutchison effect. No N in the middle, by the way. And one of the effects that he observes when he fires these energy beams at these enclosures that he's built is things will levitate. And he's had a 70-pound cannonball levitate, about 6 inches or a foot in the air. And then this is using 400 watts of power only, which is about the equivalent amount of energy to 4 light bulbs. So with that amount of energy, he's able to levitate a 70-pound or thereabouts cannonball. So, when we see this idea of the flipped car being a side effect of some sort of levitation or anti-gravity effect, of course, is another name for it, we thought that was a pretty close match, even though a lot of people are going to say, oh, no, that's just nonsense. We can certainly understand anyone who says that. So perhaps Judy can now outline some of the other effects that we're talking about as well.
What I also notice is that where there's flipped cars, most of them have much less damage to them. They'll be upside down, but the underside looks like a car from the showroom floor. But the cars that are upright are just severely toasted. And I have not seen any upside down cars with engines missing, engine blocks missing.
And why did we latch on to that? I mean, it's probably worth to explain that. The thing was that we found a report on the internet which discussed the Hutchison effect in quite a lot of detail, and it specifically said in this report that when John had beamed energy at these samples, he observed either lift or disruption. In other words, some of the samples would fall apart and break apart, or they would levitate and fly up in the air. So again, tying that up with some of the cars, it wasn't across the board with this, but we've got a few samples where, as Judy said, the cars are in good shape when they're upside down, and in much worse shape when they aren't upside down, almost as if the energy which is being transferred is either going into an anti-gravity effect, or it's going into a destruction or a disruption effect.
But if you think about that, what is disruption? Like when we looked at the towers, it's another thing that was hitting me last summer when we were talking about steam explosions. Water, when it turns to steam, expands in a volume 1,600 times. So it really expands. And looking at the towers coming apart, like when the towers first start to go away, you have this huge just balloon of dust squirting out from all directions. And it sort of reminded me of water turning into steam. So how might you get a solid part of the building just suddenly expanding? And we talked also about molecular dissociation. So let's imagine that the molecules, instead of attracting to each other, suddenly, for whatever reason, repel each other. That is, in essence, like levitation. Instead of the whole car being repelling the ground, how about each little molecule repelling its adjacent molecule, so it would come apart?
I mean, it's almost kind of, one phrase that's come into my mind about that is kind of macro levitation and micro levitation, where macro levitation would be the whole car, for example, and the micro levitation would be at the, the very much smaller molecular level. And, this whole idea of the molecules repelling each other. And another thing that Judy's put in this series is a link to an article which, we can give this a name because this has been discussed in some of the fringe science, and it's called the Casimir effect. And we believe that somebody has worked out how to switch on and off this Casimir effect, which is apparently at a certain level of molecular structure. This Casimir force ends up being a repulsive force, but there are certain things in nature which cause it not to actually end up having a repulsive effect. The various sort of magnetic fields that are in the atom, and the nuclear force is a strong and weak nuclear force, that sort of thing. So John has been playing around with this stuff, John Hutchison, and he's actually helped us quite a bit on this, and we're very glad of that. But he's actually given us some sample pictures, and in fact that I can probably mention is one of the other effects we've seen. With the fires. Perhaps Judy can mention the fires that John has sent us some pictures of.
There's a video that's also on this web series that has a metal boat, aluminum boat, with fires jumping all around on the ship hull. No smoke. It's
no smoke.
It's this cold kind of fire like we see at the World Trade Center. There's a picture from the World Trade Center where you have metal on fire next to paper that's not burning, and the firefighters are just walking through it, their pant legs dragging right through it, like they're not afraid of it, as though the fire was painted into the picture. And that is very much like this video clip of the fire on the boat, the little toy boat, where the fire just runs around the boat, and it's, what's burning? Aluminum?
That's right. There's no other fuel for this fire to actually burn with in the demonstration that John sent us the video of. And the other interesting thing, if you watch this video that John sent us, we've got a link on the web pages that Judy gave the article for, gave the link for to the articles, and it's at www.drjudywood.com, and there's a link from the home page there. And one of the things that we noticed on this video is that the fires actually seem to be occurring sometimes when John has got his energy beams switched on. We can tell on this video when he switches the beams on and off, because the boat is in a little tank of water, and you can see the water droplets kind of shimmering in the video when he's got the energy switched on, and then the water will go calm when he switches the energy off. And even when the energy is switched off, we see these certain sections of the video, which is only about a minute and a half long or something. The fire actually appears even when the energy is switched off, and we've tried to. Judy's done a great job with tying up this with some of the witness testimony as well from the New York first responders, which we got off the New York Times website. One particular very interesting testimony that ties up very, very closely with this data, where he actually describes going back towards the fire truck, and the thing blows up, it's actually a very interesting testimony to read, because he also describes this force which lifts him, and then the force goes into his bag, but he doesn't actually describe the way that force manifests itself in his bag.
He does imply that he doesn't want to touch it. It looks like it's been affected somehow, the stuff that was in his bag.
Yeah, yeah. You know, and Judy's put all this onto the web page, and you know, I'd encourage everyone to go and have a read through it, and you know, and see what they think. And again, if I can mention a couple of the other characteristics, such as what John, I don't know if this is John's name or Judy's name, but the jellification, which is John has one of the really strange things that John has repeatedly shown. He's got, I think, probably maybe 100 of these metal samples where bars are bent in half, and you look at the samples that he's got, and there's some very weird melting effects. And Judy had managed to tie this up with some of the samples that NIST have of the steel beams, which are actually, Judy's got this great name for it, and she calls it the rolled up carpet. And you'll see that in the website. It literally does look like a steel beam, where you know you've got somebody's rolled up a whole roll of carpet, and then and then slung it over their shoulder, and it bent. You know how carpet bends when it's rolled, and the beam looks very much like this, and then that ties up very closely with one of John's steel samples, aluminium samples. But he's also seen effects on steel too, and that's what we've been trying to get from John, is some information about the various effects on the different types of metals, because we know that different types of metals were, you know, used in the construction of the World Trade Center, of course. Judy wanted to mention one of the other characteristics.
Yeah, these wheat checks that are rolled up, they're rolled around a vertical axis. If the building were collapsing, wouldn't they be bent around a horizontal axis?
Yeah.
And the big steel spandrels, it's rolled up, like a rolled up carpet. Another characteristic I noticed early on, I didn't know what it meant until now, was I call it the peeling effect. There were vehicles that looked like the door through the split thickness had peeled down. It was bizarre. It wasn't a burning, and these are not laminated metal doors. Why was it peeled to the midplane of the door? I saw this in several cars. Well, I also found pictures of aluminum beams on John Hutchison's site that are split through the thickness. The aluminum just sort of explodes and peels apart in this exact same way.
Yeah, so, you know, again, we're seeing a lot of these common
You're saying this is coming from energy.
Yes, yeah.
Explain that to our listeners.
Well,
what kind of energy would produce these things?
Well, John, the best person to ask would be John Hutchison, and you know, I have to confess that I haven't studied the circuit diagrams for the equipment that he uses. But having said that, that information is available on his website, or some of it is. And we, just to try and answer that a little bit, he's basically using things like old radar equipment, and as you know, radar equipment sends out powerful radio signals, because they have to be very powerful, because of what's called the inverse square law, where if the radio signal is beamed out, it drops off at a distance proportional to the distance squared, but also the reflected signal coming back drops off to the distance of squared, so you've got actually 4 power drop in the signal between what's sent out and what's received. So what that means is, I know it sounds like a bit of technical math, but that means that you've got to have quite a powerful emitting beam for a radar to work. And John's one of these guys who likes to go to naval and army surplus stores and buys this equipment, takes it back to his apartment, which if you go and see the pictures of his apartment on his blog and things, it's pretty amazing. It's like it's like NASA compressed into a sort of 1-bedroom apartment. It's amazing. And he will beam this radar energy at his samples, and then I think he uses other signal generators to mix in radio frequency signals from, I think, upwards of 10 hertz to I don't know, up to a few gigahertz, I believe. And that's how he observes these effects. and initially he was only able to produce this effect about 10% of the time, but over time he got better at it.
I think it's close. It's 100% of the time now.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, we have spoken with John quite a bit about this, and we initially thought he would be quite uncomfortable speaking to us, because this is what we've experienced in terms of, we've approached a few people and tried to say, you know, would you try and comment on this or give us any feedback, and they've just sort of said, well, basically no. You know, which has been a bit unfortunate, but this is the way that things go in this arena. So we think, you know, what John has been doing is very important, and it's not only us that think it's important. You know, a lot of people have been to see him. He's had people from the military-industrial complex have actually been to his house, and you know, and said, oh, this looks really interesting, John. Can we, like, you know, take this back to the Pentagon? And John, being John, is a lovely guy. He said, yeah, of course you can. You know, I think it's you need to look at this. You know, which is what they've apparently done. And you know, he's basically given us some information about who's been to see him, and it's actually very interesting. And again, I'd encourage people to go to the website and see who's actually mentioned there, because it does tie up with other aspects of you know, the research and the dealings that Judy has been involved in over the last 12 months. You know, there's a couple of names which really spring out, and we actually have an audio broadcast which I actually had on my website from 2005 from a, you know, George Newry show, and John was talking about a particular you know, set of people in this broadcast, and it was pretty amazing. We were pretty amazed by this. Oh, sorry, it was Judy sent me a note, and it's Art Bell, not George Newry, so I got that one wrong, even though it was on my own website. And there you go. So yeah, so you know, we found a lot of kind of dots just jumping out and joining up. It's been pretty incredible, and we really feel now. I feel very, very strongly that we're kind of reaching some kind of crunch point with this. Because I think when you look at these effects and you follow it through, one of the key things, I'm probably talking too much here, I should let Judy talk more, but one of the key things that we think this is related to is cold fusion, which I think we really wanted to get that in. And if Judy wants to talk to that a bit more, that would be absolutely great.
Yes, one thing I would like to point out, it isn't necessarily a huge amount of energy that must be put into the system. It's how the energy is used. And an analogy that we came up with, Andrew and I, in talking, is think of a bunch of structures. If you were asked to put each one of those 100 structures on their side, how much effort would that take? Now, how about if you have a needle on the end of a thread swinging, and you just tap the first one and they all go down, like dominoes? That takes very little energy to put all of those structures on their side. And what this Hutchison effect apparently does is something very similar to that. It just starts off a reaction which then continues and takes off. So you don't need much energy, it's the type of energy. Kind of like exciting the natural frequency of a structure. My favorite one is the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. The wind excited the natural frequency, and the bridge self-destructed. Pretty weird. And it's like a child on a swing set. If you just push a little bit just at the right point, you get a huge swing, and it keeps, you know, increasing. If you push at the wrong point in the swing, it decreases the effect. So it's how the energy is used. And if you can trigger something to release the energy from within or to change the structure, it might not take much energy at all. And one of the ways we know that not a lot of energy was put in on 9/11 was that the dust clouds were not hot. People were mowed down by the dust cloud. They ducked behind a car. Then they got up and were fine. They didn't get cooked. We saw no cooked bodies after the dust cloud rolled through.
And again, you know, this Judy mentioned the lack of heat. Then, of course, well, we've already said cold fusion. which is the layman's term for what's been called low-energy nuclear reactions, and it has also been called chemically assisted nuclear reactions. And that's one of the key points. A lot of people, if you go on the internet, will talk about the nuke theory of the World Trade Center, and they'll say, oh, well, it was a nuclear explosion because people have very sadly ended up with cancer, and it's a huge level of destruction. And Judy's talk, which we've also now got on the internet, and you can find it on Google Video, called "The New Hiroshima," that will go through a lot of this data, but before we actually latched onto the Hutchison effect, and before she latched onto that. But so the cold fusion effect, where you're really exploiting the energy which is already within the atomic level. And to go back to the domino analogy that Judy mentioned, the way I kind of think of it is that if you take a piece of metal, a steel bar or an aluminium bar, at the atomic level, that's actually what's called a crystal lattice, and so the atoms in that metal are arranged in like a lattice, which is like a grid, sort of 3D grid structure. Now, something in nature has to use energy to arrange these atoms into a grid structure. And if you can find some property of physics to kind of break up that lattice structure and make it into a molecular, or an atomic rather, domino toppling effect, that's what we think is actually happening with this sort of destruction. It's at that sort of level, if I can explain it like that.
In September of 2005, the National Institute of Standards and Technology issued their final report. And I know that Judy and Dr. Morgan Reynolds have sued them because under the Data Quality Act, and said that they just got it wrong. What has happened with that suit?
Very good question. With the to the Data Quality Act and the request for corrections, they have now answered my appeal as of 2 days ago.
Oh, is that right?
And it's interesting that it contradicts the previous one. The one that I had sent my appeal in August to, they said, oh, there was no conflict of interest with ARA. Yeah, okay, you have to prove to us that ARA really does manufacture directed energy weapons. And I had done that. Now they said, well, it doesn't matter because we specifically told ARA not to investigate what happened.
What?
It's crazy.
Willful negligence?
Willful blindness.
Willful blindness. Yeah. That they've said earlier that there was no corroborating evidence for deliberate destruction of the towers. But here they're saying they specifically told their contractors not to investigate what happened.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. And I think one of the things I'll just mention is in relation to the legal cases. One of the names which came up, anyone can go onto the internet and find Dr. Woods and Dr. Morgan Reynolds' legal cases. And one of the defendants that was listed in that case, well, it was probably, I think, started about last April, so we're talking, 8-9 months ago. One of the names that's listed in the defendants actually came up in our, research into the Hutchison effect. And so that really jumped out, and John confirmed to us that, these guys were involved, and he even went as far as giving us the names of a couple of people who were involved. So we were thinking, this is just unbelievable.
It's interesting, the radio broadcast, the Art Bell one, that was a couple of months before the final NIST report came out. I've got that audio clip on the top of that new series. And here, John is just talking about how it's weird. The past 10 months has been this flurry of activity. I've had folks from NASA contacting me, folks from the Pentagon, and folks from some company called SAIC, whatever that stands for. How interesting that just before the NIST report, the final report comes out, he has this flurry of contacts.
Absolutely, And we've seen a few repeated themes of that, in the stuff that we've done. And I say that I think the key in all of this question is the energy. I've been saying to a few people that I've had a chance to speak to while I'm here, that we really now do stand at a juncture, and looking at what's happened at the World Trade Center, I think, is one of the huge keys to everything that's going on in the world right now. And I've certainly, this has been so much of a revelation to me over the last year, and particularly in the last few weeks. I'm thinking that a lot of the other global issues fade into insignificance because of the energy issue. We've essentially now, what I would like to steal a phrase from somebody who's across the room from me at the moment, we think that the destruction of the World Trade Center was the disclosure that almost infinite, almost free energy exists. And because of that, we've seen that technology has been taken up by some group of people somewhere. I don't know who they are, but they have taken that technology. People like John Hutchison are still doing parlor tricks with it, and will continue to do so, thankfully. And they've taken it and they've turned it into a weapon. So rather than using it to mitigate the effects of global warming, or this, any issue, pick an issue basically, they have turned it into a weapon, and they used it to create a fake war on terror. Those are the facts now as I see them. And I really challenge anybody to come up with some data which will refute these conclusions.
It's amazing with cars being burned, but there's almost no paper burn.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, that goes right back to the pictures of the fires. I mean, we've got, Judy's particularly picked out one on the website, which we've got one of the FDNY personnel. He's actually seems to be almost walking through this fire. It's bizarre, and
just dust and paper flowing.
Yeah. So again, what energy source did this? Well, we now think we know, because John has given us all the pictures of the stuff that he's been doing. I think one of the other things we didn't mention that Judy's got a good study on is the rust, and this is something that John has seen with some of the stainless steel samples that he sent us. He's seen rusting, which is very unusual in the terms of the
stainless steel.
Yeah, rusting. With a very, very short time scale. So that yet another characteristic that we've got there. And the other thing again, which you'll find on the web page, is the holes. John has got samples with bars, and he's fired the beams at these bars, and they've got a hole, a void, a hollowed out section in the middle of the bar. And Judy's very nicely put together that picture on the one side, and then a picture of World Trade Center Building 6, isn't it, on the other.
With voids, there's just nothing left in the building. There's just no material there.
Yeah. So again, that's another characteristic that seems to tie up quite well.
There's another one that I've become fascinated with is round holes in windows.
Round holes in windows?
Yeah, like just somebody took a circular cutout of the window, and there's no other cracks much in it.
Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest thing that we've forgotten up to now, Judy, is one of the key factors that came up in this Hutchison effect report said that the effect wasn't always self-quenching, and what that means is
if there's enough mass, too much mass of the object, they found it's not self-quenching. And you remember in October when I was up there, seeing the dirt getting moved in and out, and still seeing the fuming puffs come out of the ground.
Right. What is the explanation for all that dirt, the truckloads of dirt?
And it's interesting. I've got a section in this new series where you see that they've cut down to the old PATH train station that was built in the early 1900s, 1915, around there, and it's just all concrete. And then pretty soon you see they're hauling dirt out of there. This past November. Why the dirt arrived to have to be hauled out? They're not excavating down because there's pictures where they're down lower, busting up the concrete.
Yeah.
Dirt is used for cleaning up toxic spills, like when they cleaned up after Chernobyl. Bring in dirt, haul it out. Bring in new dirt, haul it out. And it also has become apparent that they are building a concrete vault around ground zero that goes down almost 10 stories. How did they get rid of nuclear waste? Concrete vaults.
And this whole idea, I think, that there's an ongoing reaction. In other words, the effects of the technology don't always finish when you turn off the energy. The nuclear process, this domino toppling effect, and John has observed this as well with some of the samples that he's made. The domino toppling effect seems to go on after you switch the energy off. And we think this is what's happening at ground zero. The residual effects of the energy, where the bits of material continually breaking down at a molecular level, is still happening, and they're trying to kind of put the dirt in there to soak up the effects of this nuclear, ongoing low-level nuclear reaction, and taking it out.
So in Banker's Trust, I'd like to mention, they had that gash in the front, which I believe was where it got infected.
This was a steel beam which was ejected from the World Trade Center. And
it looked like that, but I think that was just hanging in the gas that was from other reasons. But the picture I have of the snowball cloud, it rubbed down the front of Banker's Trust. And I think that's how it got infected. But in any case, they didn't realize the building was in that bad a shape. And they tried repairing it. And there's pictures I have on the site of Banker's Trust being repaired. They repaired that gash, put in new floors, and then they realized the problem is still continuing, and that's when they decided, I think it was in 2004, decided they needed to take the building apart. And it's been this horrendous series of fumbling and bumbling as to why the building is still not taken apart. I think it's because it's this huge problem. So they started taking it apart, and they get to that area that was repaired, and there's huge rust in those beams adjacent to that area. I call it furry rust. It looks like it's been at the bottom of the ocean for 100 years, where adjacent beams do not look like that in other areas. So this is something that is continuing to come apart, and that causes me to look over at WTC-7. I believe they took down WTC-7 because they knew for sure that would be infected, and it would have this problem. They were hoping, I believe, that they could save Banker's Trust, that they wouldn't affect it, but they accidentally got it.
Yeah, and we actually found, Judy found a forum where we've had the whole story of the Banker's Trust building has been posted over about a couple of year period, is it, or something? And this is on a forum called Wired New York, and we actually started to post a couple of things on there, and very quickly the discussion was kind of jumped upon, and it eventually shut down, or the thread was closed anyway. So but that forum was very useful for some of the pictures they posted, and we'd had even had some weird fire incidents. I think, or certainly one. It was one or two.
Last August they had a fire that is one bumbling maneuver after another that was holding up the taking down of Banker's Trust. But last August there was a fire there. Here you have this gutted out building, open floors, and you have 3 firemen trapped. I think 2 were killed. But the pictures of the fire, the steel's on fire. This weird metal fire. Yeah, the steel structure's on fire.
That's what it looks like. Yeah, it's a very, very strange fire. There doesn't seem to be, it's like you're looking into, I thought initially it was a multi-story car parking lot thing, where there's obviously no windows and doors, because this building has no windows, there's no furniture. It's just it's essentially a framework, and you can see the fire is burning on the frame, and they've just got some wood sheets on there,
and the wood is not on fire.
Yeah, but the wood doesn't look as if it's burning. It's again, it's really strange. If you look at it and just glance at it for a few seconds, you probably wouldn't see it. But if you spend 3 or 4 minutes studying it carefully, you can see that this fire doesn't seem to have an obvious cause. So again, we're wondering if it's these ongoing effects of the material kind of breaking down and causing some type of low-level nuclear reaction, and that's what's actually happening.
No, we originally thought that these were advanced microwave weapons.
The microwaves could be involved, as well as radio frequency waves. There's various frequencies. As I've said with my spectrum chart, I said, well, pick out what wavelength you want, or mix and match. And it could be just a variety of particular related frequencies that interact.
Yeah, and I mean, again, this exactly ties up with what we've seen from John. He sent us a number of pictures of the equipment that he uses, this has actually been something of a standing joke between Judy and myself about these pictures of equipment. But on a more serious note, we can actually see he has actually got some microwave, it actually says on the front microwave generate, I might say microwave generate, we can see microwave energy on the front of this picture of this equipment that he sent us. And then he's got another one where it's got a knob which is labelled in gigahertz, which again is some other type of generator. So we're seeing all kinds of data points tying up with this. So we're pretty sure that this is the real deal.
Okay. Let me tell our listeners we're going to take your calls at 588-0893 or 202-588-0893, and you can talk with Andrew Johnson and Dr. Judy Woods. Let me ask you this. Now that they have finally responded to your appeal, the appeal that you and Dr. Woods and Dr. Morgan Reynolds have sued them about, what's the next step with that?
We filed I filed a QTAM case last April, and it was unsealed September 12th this year, and that is moving forward. Morgan filed his in May, and they unsealed it in July, a lot sooner. So his is a little bit ahead of mine. It got ahead of mine there, and we are continuing with this. This is about the fraud.
Explain to our listeners what unsealed means.
Well, it had to be filed under seal, which means we can't tell anybody about it or talk about it. So it was filed last April, but nobody was allowed to know about it. And for mine, it was unsealed September 12th, which meant beginning that date, I could talk about it, and we could notify the defendants about it and start preparing the case. Now, this is about the contractors for NIST having defrauded the American people. And if they were asked to let's say half the budget went to filling coffee cups. That's defrauding the government to use such expense to do nothing. If they were asked to find what was going on 9/11 or something even in the vicinity of it, for example, ARA, Applied Research Associates, they have a government contract where they are to know anything about everything to do with any weapon of mass destruction that exists or has ever existed on the planet. If they do know about every possible weapon of mass destruction, and they look at the World Trade Center, that's willful blindness. To say, oh, the building just fell apart due to a trash can fire.
And I know that Dr. Morgan Reynolds, they're working on another submission to kind of proceed to the next step. There have been a number of attempts to kind of basically dismiss the case, but that has just resulted in having to kind of tighten up a few of the bits of documentation, or rather add to the huge pile that we've already sort of collected, or and that's also been an ongoing process, which has been running in parallel really to the other research that we've been doing. So we're really been working hard at this to try and sort of take this forward.
What are the other physicists responding to this whole mess? How are they responding?
In physicists in general?
Yeah.
this is a problem. Folks, I think, might feel helpless, and so they want to keep their job. They have a family to support, so they're going to stick their head in the sand and hope somebody else fixes the problem. And this goes on and on across the board. What is just absolutely astounding is that if you look at ground zero on the late afternoon of 9/11, you look and you have a rubble pile that doesn't even reach 1 story high through the complex. You know, building that's 8 stories tall towers over the rubble pile.
Yeah.
These buildings used to be 110 stories that morning.
Yeah.
Where'd the material go? And why, after 6 years, we don't have more people asking that question?
I mean, again, we know we've had a couple of people. Recently, we had a chap from Cambridge, Dr. Sethan. He came out with this paper, which again said, "Oh yes, the collapse was perfectly normal and as expected." And I think that was about 6 months ago, was it, Judy? He'd come out with this. And also just recently, I think we'd given you word of this, Ambrose. We had a chat from the BBC tried to get in touch with Judy, and
yes,
yeah, I think Frank had made you aware of that, and that was very interesting because this came around at a time when we were really trying to finalise, or Judy was trying to finalise, I should say, and again I was kind of looking over her shoulder, so to speak. These new pages which we've been discussing, and this chap kind of appeared and said, "Oh, Dr. Wood, could I, have an interview with you, please?" And I recognised who this chap was because he was responsible. He was the producer of a BBC Conspiracy Files programme, which was broadcast, I think, 16th of February last year, and this, was one of these documentaries that said, "Oh, Popular Mechanics, they're a good scientific establishment. They'll be able to disprove that the towers, collapsed in an unusual manner." And they went to the chap at Popular Mechanics and said, "Oh yes, Building 7 collapse was perfectly normal. It's what happens when buildings catch on fire. They completely turn to dust. It's a
20 minutes.
Yeah. And they collapse in 6 seconds. It's nothing to worry about, people. Nothing to see here." And so I basically was quite firm with this BBC chap, and I said to him, "Well, I really didn't like that documentary you produced, and here's the reasons why." And I listed a few of the reasons, and he sort of came back and just said, "Oh well, but I'd still like to speak to Judy Wood." And I said, "Well, how?" I said to him, "Well, how do we know that you're going to put this evidence in a fair light?" He didn't really, unfortunately, have an answer for me.
He never addressed that.
No, he didn't say, "Well, this time it's going to be different." He didn't give me anything that suggested that he was going to produce a fair and balanced documentary. He didn't. I suggested to him that perhaps he could, for example, we've talked about the Ketam case, and I said, "Well, perhaps you could go to your news editors and say, well, Dr. Wood, Dr. Reynolds have these Ketam cases in the States. They're against the NIST body. You can go and look. They're filed with the courts. They're valid legal, documents. Put those on the news bulletin, and if you can get those onto a news bulletin for us, then you're giving this matter some serious exposure, so we'll know that you're sincere." And he just basically came back and said, "Oh no, I can't do that." So of course I sent all this to Judy and said, "Well, if you want to talk to him, you can talk to him." But I think kind of, when she'd seen all this thread of correspondence, which went on over a period of a couple of hours.
What really alerted me, the reason why I asked Andrew who this guy was from the BBC, is that he emailed me and wanted to do the interview in the next hour or two. It reminded me of a used car salesman trying to close the deal before he realized that the car is a wreck or a bad lemon. It's like you want to rope them in before they can think about it, and that doesn't seem like a very good way to do a documentary.
Right.
And
caller, you're going to be the only caller we're going to be able to take today.
Oh.
Okay.
It doesn't matter to me. This is a revelation beyond revelations. I'm so happy that someone on the planet really understands that there's something very, very devious going on in this country with 9/11. This trumps everything, and I'm sure that a lot of FW listeners and people around the world instinctively know that there was something else going on, and it continues to go on. This hole in the window, these things that these experts are questioning are absolute necessities. I can't say enough for WPFW to have these people, these caliber of people on. It's wondrous. It's an absolute revelation. This trumps everything, and if this story ever gets out to the populace, heads will roll forever. This will change the course of the United States and possibly the whole world's history. This has to get out. Thank you very much. I can't say enough.
Thank you so much. And then Friday you can come in and ask your questions. Dr. Woods, would you slowly give websites again so that they can look up this material, those who have never heard this before?
It's drjudywood.com. That's drjudywood, all one word, drjudywood.com. And at the top of that page, you'll see 3 rows of pictures. The third row is a double row that shows what happened at the WTC, and the other row is the Hutchison effect. You can click on any of those pictures, and it takes you to the series.
Excellent. Thank you, and thank you, Andrew, for coming here. And on Friday, we're going to follow up, and we're going to open the phone so that the listeners can ask you all the questions they must have by now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. We're really grateful. Thank you so much, everyone, and to the caller who called in.
Yes, it's wonderful, and it's so heartwarming to know such listeners are out there.
Absolutely.
And that's going to do it for us for the day. You have a great week, and I'll see you on Friday. And on Friday, come loaded with your questions. Take care now.
Thank you.
And top of the morning, top of the week, this is We Ourselves. I'm Ambrose Lane Sr. On Friday, we began a 2-part series. We raised the question, was 9/11 the result of an inside job by our government or by someone connected to people at the highest levels in our government? Over the past several months, I have been honored to have Dr. Judy Woods share with my listeners her important scientific findings. And today, as well as on Friday, another great mind, Andrew Johnson, came all the way here from England. And both are in our studios today to share their views on this issue. Now, what would be the purpose of our government or people at the highest, or someone connected with people at the highest level in our government committing such an atrocious act? Well, its purpose is to create the nationwide emotional response that enabled our government to mislead us into invading Iraq. Iraq and Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with what happened at the Twin Towers. And so we've had them to discuss this issue and to expose to the world the scientific findings by Dr. Woods. And I promised you on Friday that we would make them available to you for your questions because we didn't have a chance to get to your questions on Friday. Now on Friday, before I get to that, on Friday, both Andrew Johnson and Dr. Woods discussed a concept that we haven't talked about before called the Hutchison effect. So this morning, before opening up the phones for your questions, although you can go ahead and call and get in line. The number to call is 588-0893 or 202-588-0893. I would like to ask Andrew to tell us in as simple terms as possible about what the Hutchison effect is and to introduce another guest that's on the line. Andrew?
Thank you very much indeed, Ambrose. We're really honoured to be here again, and glad that we have this opportunity to display this information before the audience, and hopefully get them to look at it, evaluate it, and I think they will come to the conclusion that it's very important information. And I will try and start with answering the description that you asked me to give, and I've got something here to read out which is relatively short, and then we're going to go over to John to get his take on this. The Hutchison effect is a collection of phenomena which were discovered accidentally by John Hutchison during attempts to study waves made by Tesla back in 1979. The Hutchison effect occurs as the result of radio wave interferences in a three-dimensional zone space volume radiated by two or more high-voltage sources, usually a Van de Graaff generator and two or more Tesla coils. The results are levitation of heavy objects, fusion, which is joining of dissimilar materials such as metal and wood. The anomalous melting without heating of metals, without burning adjacent material, spontaneous fracturing of metals which separate by sliding in a sideways fashion, and both temporary and permanent changes in the crystalline structure and physical properties of metals. And I think really what I can then do is, hopefully we've got John on the line. John, are you there?
No, then John Hutchison.
John,
welcome to We Ourselves.
Well, thank you, kind sir. I'm on the West Coast, and hello to all you folks in Washington, D.C.
Great, John. It's great to have you. Ambrose, is there anything you wanted to say to John, or shall I?
No, I want him to go ahead and talk about the Hutchison effect and how he discovered it and its relevance.
Great.
And did you hear the description I just read out, John?
Yes.
Fantastic.
That would be the text, would think be written up in the 80s.
Okay, and what would be your comments on that? And could you expand on any points or make them a bit clearer for the listeners?
Well, I feel that there's a lot more that's been written up, of course, on the Hutchison effect books, publications, and other scientific data. There's somebody already replicating it. And I am doing it on a smaller scale here prior to the Canadian government seizing the main lab. So.
Okay. And do you think that there was any sort of main things that I missed out with that description?
Spontaneous combustion, fires that appear from nowhere is one of them.
Right, yes, absolutely. Now, you've obviously been playing with this for a long time, and I know you've been through the wars, at various times with having your equipment confiscated and things like this. I mean, that I believe that's happened at least twice. Is that correct?
No, main time was 1990 when I was in Europe. It was the Canadian government that took the entire laboratory and tried to make a secret operation, but the newspapers found out about it and published the news.
Okay.
And yeah, that was but I've been raided before in 2000.
Okay. And one of the things that we wanted to just check with you, that I believe it was in 1983. There was a person called John Alexander, Colonel John Alexander, in fact, who'd come to see you because he'd learned about what you were doing. I wondered if you could sort of mention a little bit about that.
Oh, yes. Colonel John Alexander was 1983. He came with a team from Los Alamos, and he said to me that we're expecting a threat from, as I recall it, a threat from the Soviet Union.
Okay.
And that was a concern for the American government. So I gave a demonstration for about 4 months working with the team. And unfortunately, there were some effects that happened, and sometimes it didn't. It seemed like the equipment was sabotaged, and I learned from yet another lieutenant colonel that a fellow by the name of Bob sabotaged the entire project. So John Alexander was a little upset over that, and he brought in another team from McDonnell Douglas to do a clear, not classified report, which I still have that report. And then after that, of course, the Canadian government did their experiments and kept it a matter of national security.
Of course. Now, I think that's really interesting that we do know that people in the military are well aware of what you've been doing. It's not as if you have been, working away totally as like a hermit. They're fully aware of what you've been doing, and I guess we've got to conclude that they are. So I wondered if Judy wanted to ask anything and make a few points to follow on from this.
Hello. Yes, yesterday Andrew and I were in New York City at Ground Zero, and we noticed a lot of interesting things continuing, like the fumes coming out of the ground still after this many years, and why it might not be. When does it stop? When this effect begins, why might it not stop?
Yeah, just to add to that, we understand one of the key things is that in many cases when you start your experiments, you can switch off the power, and the effect that you're generating will continue. We just wanted to get your comments, really, John, on that type of effect that we've seen at the World Trade Center, as Judy just mentioned.
The fuming effect.
Yeah.
Well, we're trying to do a parallel here, I believe, and when I switch off the equipment, sometimes there's metal samples that have been analyzed by the Max Planck Institute that seem to be accelerated ahead in time.
Wow.
And the crystalline structures are always changing very fast, and the magnetic properties are changing extremely fast. So this is in regards to when I basically shut down the power, these samples, which are many of them, tend to alter.
Right.
Ongoing.
Okay, and I think the other thing which I wanted to really stress with this is something that in our research, or Judy's research really, and my looking over her shoulder, the whole energy question is one that we've been looking at, and a lot of people have said there is absolutely no way that directed energy could have taken down the World Trade Center towers, because the amount of energy, I think there's this figure, I don't know what it is, I think it's something like 5 times the total output of the Earth. And so these people say, that there's absolutely no way that you can do that because we don't have that technology.
But gravity is enough?
Or gravity is enough. That's another group of people that say that. And, I just wanted to check with you because it's very important that people understand the amount of energy that you're using in some of these experiments, and I wondered if you could address that question.
Oh, I would be happy to, sir.
Thank you.
The energy in the equipment has been measured at 100 to 400 watts. And when I was giving a demonstration for Maine News, the newscaster accidentally chopped the extension cord in half by accident and shut down the entire lab. So it's around 400 watts, the lowest power. And if I'm using more modern equipment, of course, I'm up to maybe 1,000 watts energy to drive the systems and that. So I know what you're saying about directed weapons. They've been around a long, long time, actually. I was on the DoD's mailing list for exotic technologies, and some of the projects were directed energy, and as well as antimatter manufacturing.
Wow, yeah, I mean, that's something we haven't really looked at. I think that, we could really spend hours and hours talking about this. But
there's some interesting evidence that, however, that really caught my attention about Iraq was that, if you don't mind me bringing it up.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning because that's, you know, it is interesting that we've come across some of the pictures from there, and obviously it's a very emotive topic for a lot of people and a lot of listeners. But you know, I think I've just mentioned, to sort of link up to what you just said, that we did come across some pictures from there which showed some similar effects. So yeah, if you want to. I
remember always that on mainstream news like CNN and that the Russians were running in there to retrieve all their documents on scalar weapons.
Right, right.
I remember that so clearly, but as history tends to bury everything.
Yes, I think sometimes it's difficult to get clear information, but what's certainly become clear to me, I don't know if I can speak for Dr. Wood, but there is, you know, a lot of this technology which has been completely hidden from the public, and I think matters like the one you just mentioned are actually more common than most of us want to accept or realise. But I think if we just sort of take us back to the energy question, and I think, you know, what you're looking at, for example, we've said already you're using perhaps 400, 500 watts of power, and you know, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that you've been able to levitate a 70-pound cannonball at one time. I know this was, I guess, a few years back. Is that about right? Did I get that right?
Well, that's absolutely right. That was one thing we levitated, but hundreds, if not thousands, of things we levitated. The biggest being 1,500-pound transformer we levitated, which is a repeatable experiment. And most recently here,
wow,
about 1,000 pounds of equipment was shifted around very strong here, causing the fellow that was filming it to get sick, and as well as I found out just yesterday that in a two square blocks, everybody got violently ill for a second. I don't know what this all means because I haven't had this happen before, and I had another email come in late last night about the same thing. So it's kind of scary in a way that, but I'm not ill, and nobody below me or above me is ill. But this field is known to actually go out and disappear and reappear somewhere else, much like Tesla's experiments, the same kind of thing, where he was able to, by accident, blow out the Colorado Springs power plant 25 miles away from his tiny shed in 1900.
It's interesting. You mentioned a transformer weighing 1,500 pounds. My Honda Accord, I remember, was 1,900 pounds. It's about the same.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So if you can lift a transformer, could you lift a car?
Yeah, a car. We actually lifted in part, or twisted a building a little bit, caused cracks in it.
Uh-oh.
The mayor of this city came here, and he's, a couple of years ago, talking with me, a friendly fellow, Mayor Wright of New Westminster, and he was talking about, he's giving reports of concrete cracking up, as well as citizens in distress. And it seems when I do an experiment like I did for National Geographic TV and film, I blew out the elevator, so they couldn't get their equipment down after the experiment. And just recently, for Fox TV, I was doing an experiment, and then some plumbing exploded downstairs. But I take in consideration, too, that when I was doing the McDonnell Douglas experiments, that we had a water main explode out in the street.
Oh, my gosh.
So that's written up in some of the text. So I've been through a lot of mischief, and they haven't.
Yes.
They have not burned me at the stake, thank goodness.
Maybe I should tell you what you say can and will be used against you.
Well, this is a good point. Thank you. Much needed.
Well, I mean, you know, we're obviously making this public for just those sorts of reasons. And I think one point I wanted to just dwell on for a second is that, you know, Judy and I, we watch the internet forums quite closely, and there are quite a number of people who are saying, you know, oh, John Hutchison can't reproduce the effects which he's, you know, makes. Mm-hmm. And I wondered, you know, what your response would be. I almost feel silly asking the question, but
I honestly think they don't listen to radio or watch TV or read books, because I've been doing this quite regularly for Fox TV in 2000 and onward up for Griffin Productions, as well as National Geographic TV and Film, and onward with many, many different crews have come and gone out of here, and I can sit down, turn everything on, and guarantee an effect within 5 minutes.
Fantastic.
So whatever they're reading is maybe so old that they just don't bother researching. That's what I feel.
Yeah, absolutely, John. I totally agree, and I think we can clearly demonstrate without any shadow of a doubt that we've got multiple experiments filmed, as you've said, for TV companies. You've had the military come to see you, and again, just to mention the website, which we forgot to mention earlier on, it's www.drjudywood.com for the stuff that we're talking about in relation to 9/11. And John, if you want to give your own websites just now, if the listeners want to note them down.
Oh, for sure, folks. It's www.hutchisoneffect.ca.
Okay, great. And we mentioned that we took a trip to Ground Zero in New York actually yesterday, and we did film a couple of interesting things. We only had a few hours there, but even in that time we were able to observe a few things. I think Judy was going to say a few words about that.
Yes, we even stopped at the visitor center there and met some wonderful young folks, very energetic, who were asking questions, and noted the fuming and thought maybe that had to be from blasting last summer, but that didn't make sense to them. After they said it, it just didn't make sense. But they also noted the lack of material on 9/11 after the towers went away, and they never had a good answer for that. And I really admired them for thinking, for asking themselves what they see and what they understand. The most striking thing I can remember from yesterday is my sore throat. At various points around the complex as we walked, I'd hit a pocket of something that really made my throat hurt terribly. And we also saw puffs of fumes coming out of the ground, dirt trucks coming and going with what looked to be lush topsoil. When you drill into bedrock, why would you have wet topsoil? Surely would not be something you'd want to drive on because it'd be slippery, like muck. There was not a gravel road, it was this bright reddish brown dirt, very lush. So they're hauling dirt in and out still. They're behind schedule. They're not down to the bottom. They go backwards. It seems to be the dirt comes in beginning of the week and gets moved out at the end of the week, and they start the next cycle all over again.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't actually see the dirt being trucked in, but they were doing various interesting things, sorting operations, it seemed to be, mixing what they were digging out of the ground with the excavator's shovel, with the kind of dirt, kind of seemed to be stirring it around. And we actually did video this, and hopefully we're going to post this video sort of hopefully within the next 24 hours. So if the listeners do go to the website and have a sort of look round there, you hopefully will find this video, and you can see one of the very interesting things that I filmed was a hosing down of a cable from a crane with a big fire hose, and it wasn't just like a squirt. It was quite a big gush of water over a few tens of seconds. And
the cable was dangling from a big crane. It wasn't laying on the ground. It was just straight dangling.
Mm. So, what would be your comments on all of that, John?
Well, it seems that if that's what's going on there, it seems like there's some kind of infection of some type, or something unusual happening there. Because if Judy's walking around there and getting sore throats, there's some kind of reaction or chemical reaction going on there.
Right, and Bankers Trust, as we know, had that big gash in the front, which they repaired. And then they started taking the building apart. Why would they repair it and then take the building apart? And they're still working on taking the building apart while we were there. They probably have about half of it gone. It's about 20 stories left. But with the beams they replaced the damaged ones with, the missing, there's just a void that had been in the middle of the building. There's a tremendous amount of rust on those brand new beams that were used to replace the old ones with.
That's not good. That means there's a reaction in the steel or in the ground there that's causing that to happen. And when that starts to happen, especially where the contacts with the welding and main bolts are, that leads to structural failure.
And across from Building 7, where they're building yet another temporary path train station, I think that's the 4th temporary one they've built so far, it's before the steel beams even are put in place, they're rusting. This bright orange rust, it looks like it was spray painted on, but the beams are painted green. And the path train entrance we walked down through, there's some new beams that were painted last summer, and they're completely rusted through. It's just tremendous. It looks like it's been at the bottom of the ocean for 100 years.
Oh, those are the pictures you sent me about the beams there with the bolts?
Yes, we have some additional
pictures. They're all
pictures.
rust coming out of the paint?
Correct. There's paint and there's an abrupt area where it's just super rusty.
No, I saw that, and it's like if that keeps on going like that, it'll fail.
Do you have the same kind of phenomenon in your own specimens, like stainless steel that might rust?
Actually, yes. Many of our samples have turned what appeared to be like rusting, and that's stainless steel metals, high-grade stainless, and the pitting in that goes in pretty deep, and there's like a reddish, rusty color look to them.
Pretty interesting to see that in stainless steel.
Yeah, steel, like we've had many different kinds of metal samples that would be even flaking apart, and those are the ones that seem to be going ahead in time.
I think we have some pictures of those on the new series that's up on my website.
Like we made hundreds, if not thousands, of metal samples over the years, and they're deposited in Germany, Japan, Los Alamos, of course, U.S. Pentagon, I believe, as well as in Toronto, Canada. And I gave away a number of them as gifts too, and they're being always analyzed, tested, and that. I got about 500 pounds, I think, here.
Whoa.
Wow. So I think it's fair to say that we've got all the evidence, the physical evidence that you mentioned there. It's all around the world. You certainly haven't kept it secret, and I think that brings us on to a couple of points as well. One is that I know, for example, some people have said to you, oh, John, this is incredible, which it is, of course. Why haven't you patented this? And I just wondered, why?
Well, I'm not interested in patents or even proving it. What I am doing is replicating old technology, basically. Okay. And even my team said, well, how can you patent an effect? But what I like doing, actually, is not to gain all this, like patents and all that on the free energy device I'm working on, or the levitation. What I like doing is inspiring kids out there when I do these experiments through the television people and that. And that's the premise of my new upcoming network TV show. They are working on right now. It's different episodes we'll be covering are pretty fantastic and pretty demanding, and we have a fairly good team. We'll be doing the levitation as well as trying to replicate the Philadelphia experiment. And
interesting.
Some of the time experiments that were done on the South Pole.
I think we'll have to leave the listeners to explore those topics. They are very, very interesting, though. And I think, just to go back, sorry, you were going to say about the energy, Judy.
When might that series be out where folks will be able to see it?
Well, we had a meeting, phone conference, actually, a couple of days ago. Now, our main sponsors are going to start working on something. A proposal is supposed to be in maybe this day. A draft of something.
Neat.
Our producer's been working on this, or producers have been working on this for a number of years. It looks like it's going to come to reality. So I'll be doing a lot of different things, as well as my partner, and be more media exposure for it, and hopefully it will inspire the kids, the next generation of inventors, scientists, and that to go out and explore. That's
Terrific.
The theme of what I'm doing, so that's why I'm really not into patents.
Terrific. And yeah, the idea of getting energy out there free, or nearly free, and clean, and There's so many things to be discovered with it.
So much, Judy. I mean, and one of the main energy sources is what they call zero-point energy, and this is for those people with the energy problem. A cubic foot of it can power the Earth's energy needs for 100 years. And that is not my statement, but reputable science, Nobel Prize scientists like Richard P. Feynman and others I know out there.
And so there's no reason we should be paying $3 or $4 a gallon for gasoline.
No, and there's already a patent on a zero-point energy collector. 1996. Epic, because it was the first one ever accepted by the U.S. Patent Office.
Well, I wonder if there's any callers. Do you think we should take callers?
Well,
Yeah.
let's go now to the telephone. Callers have been patient. Caller, you're on. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
You're on.
Yes. Okay, I have 2 questions.
Go right ahead.
Okay. How about I looked over Dr. Judy Wood's website and also looked over the YouTube photos and video for Mr. Hutchison also, and it's very impressive. But one of my questions is, how about, as far as the World Trade Center is concerned, how about a network of directed energy devices planted inside the towers, not fired like a gun into or at the Twin Towers from some other place? That could explain some of the non-uniform effects that are described by Dr. Judy Wood. And also, what about a network of directed energy devices that are planted inside the towers using the World Trade Center Plaza's own existing radio frequencies as leverage or catalyst, or as a jumping off point for reactions that eventually brought down each tower?
Okay. Now, just for myself...
Excellent questions. Thank you so much.
Sorry, thank you very much. Sorry to interrupt. Yes, this is a very difficult question to answer, and I can't really answer it, but I'm sure John can give a few ideas and thoughts on that. But just what I would say is, I think it's very, very difficult to answer those sorts of questions accurately, because we don't really have the evidence to kind of work with. We can just look at the photographic record, but certainly I think that was some interesting ideas, and perhaps I can pass over to John. I assume you heard that okay, John?
Yes, I did. That's an interesting idea. There was a lot of interesting research on one directed weapon called the Baser, a boson-directed energy unit, by Dr. Yale at UCLA, and that was a number of years ago, too.
Your voice is fading.
Hmm?
You need to get it close to
Speak
the
up a
phone,
little
John.
louder. Your voice is fading.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Maybe it's just the lines, but yes, it was... I've seen some of these things in reality, ion cannons.
Wow. Okay. Ambrose?
Yeah, go ahead.
And I think we're going to go to the next caller now then.
Okay.
Yes,
You're
good
on,
morning.
caller.
How are you?
Good, and you?
Good. Glad to hear your voice, Ambrose.
Oh, thanks.
There has been much discussion on the steel beam, namely the temperature at which the steel would melt or even weaken so that a collapse would occur. The heat from the aviation fuel would not be sufficient to weaken or melt steel, as far as I understand. What is the temperature at which steel is harmed or weakened, and can you dispel this whole idea that the fires led to the Twin Towers collapse?
Judy?
The temperature at which steel melts doesn't seem to be very relevant when we're talking about molecular dissociation. There's a variety of ways in which you can take things apart or cause material to change state. Heat is one of them, and that's about the most inefficient way of doing it. We see from the photographs, I think we all are familiar with those pictures of people running down the street with the cloud chasing them. After the cloud passed, we didn't see any cooked bodies. We don't have any reports of people being burned up. It was not hot. Actually, there are reports that the cloud was initially a little bit cooler than the ambient temperature. So there's a different process going on.
Okay, hopefully that answers the question, and perhaps we can go to the next caller.
Hello?
Good morning.
Hello, am I in the air?
Yep.
Okay, I got a couple of questions on to Dr. Filbert there. What happened to the people on the plane if a plane didn't hit this building? Where did they disappear to? And where, you talk all this science fiction gobbledygook, which to me seems totally incomprehensible, but what happened to the plane? What happened to the people on the plane? If a plane didn't hit this building, where did the people go on the plane?
I think we're talking about molecular dissociation here and what happened to the World Trade Center buildings and about this technology.
Okay, they're going to answer your question. Now go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, we're not really talking about that issue. That's a different set of evidence, and there are some other studies that have been done on the internet regarding the issue with the planes, which does tie into this at some level, but we'd really like to spend the time on now that we've got John here to talk about those effects. So I'm sorry to sort of put that on one side, but if we could go to the next caller.
But we should answer that question as best we can.
Okay.
Because a lot of people are asking the same question.
Oh, what happened to the people on the plane?
Yeah, what happened to the plane?
We don't even know if there was a plane. That hasn't been determined, and the people can disappear a variety of ways. There's not just one way of disappearing people.
If you want me to give my honest answer, I regard it as a separate matter. I didn't mean to brush the caller off. I did do a study on some of the witness accounts from the first responders from New York City, and if you read what they said about the actual planes, and they were there when the second plane hit, you get some very, very interesting accounts. Also, again, you look at the physical evidence we have got. For example, we've got a rubber tyre on the sidewalk under some scaffolding or very near some scaffolding, and how can a rubber tyre survive a fireball? And there's several other pieces of physical evidence like that, and I particularly think that if the media can create a story about Al-Qaeda, they can create a story about some passengers getting onto planes. I don't think that's particularly difficult, but there's a lot of information to work through before you can say a lot of these statements with confidence. And again, look at the evidence and think for yourself. The same rule applies.
One thing I found interesting is after the second tower got the plane-shaped hole in it, about that time, one of the first responders was talking about cars on fire, and I went out looking and actually found the pictures of those cars on fire, and it was not a normal fire. There was no smoke coming from the fire, just spontaneous combustion of the cars, and here are firefighters walking through such a fire that doesn't appear to be hot. But
there are a lot of people in those buildings. What happened to their bodies?
Well, again, looking at some of the witness accounts, which was a separate study to some of the material effects with the Hutchison effect, we have one account of one of the people in one of the buildings seeing his friends actually, I believe, what was the word, Judy, that he used? Can you remember?
Many of them that disappeared. There was a firefighter in Building 6 off in the corner, and his buddies were like an arm's reach away, and they disappeared along with the building. The middle of the building just disappeared.
And also we have the doctors.
In other words, no bodies were left.
No bodies, no nothing. No computers, I believe, were ever found.
And the doctors, Judy, we have the video clip of the doctors describing the bodies coming into the hospital, or not coming into the hospital. Right.
There's, where are the bodies? What happened to the bodies? And they're at a loss because there are no bodies. There are no injured that need help.
Yeah, they have a certain number came in, and then they were expecting a huge number to come in, and then following that, there were none.
Mm-hmm. It's very important to to respond to our listener.
Sure.
Because a lot of people don't have that information that there were no bodies.
Okay.
Yeah. Good morning, caller. How are you today?
Hi, Ms. Lane. How are you? And
great.
Your guests. Quick, I guess, example, something, food for thought. First of all, the question that the gentleman just asked and this entire dialogue about the entire processes that happened September 11, 2001 are difficult enough, in my opinion, in a vacuum or in a perfect society to consider all those things. But considering the political climate and other things, that sort of adds, unfortunately, a lot of elements that are, well, just with that word, unfortunate, I have to consider other things because of the political climate. That being said, since I was a child, and this conversation was a lot easier for me when I was a child, I thought more open-mindedly, if you will. Mm-hmm. Now, I still retain a lot of that, and that's where my energy comes from. At 55, I'm getting younger and stronger every day. But really quickly, I just want to make this point. When I've considered since childhood how the pyramids were built, and we've considered those different documentaries over a period of 30, 40 years since I've looked at that, and this situation with the World Trade Center, and I consider what I've always thought of as a child as unlimited energy that is available that may be in neither time nor space, if you will. Quick example is when a plane flies. They found during jet technology, because of the war or whatever process, that when you turned or veered off of your course, a direct course, depending on your speed, G-force was increased, right? Now, if we call that energy, in theory, there is unlimited energy depending on your speed and direction. If you could go straight ahead at 1,000 miles an hour, stop on a dime and go the back way, whatever's in that plane would be crushed because of the G-force. From my perspective, again, food for thought, is I've always considered that there was some way to direct unlimited energy to do things, move things. And again, I consider the pyramids. Why can't we do that? Maybe we can. Maybe we don't know the technique. But do you understand where I'm going with this? I see and I've felt this. I can't explain it in the interest of time so other folks can get on. But there is something that I've always considered, and you are touching upon a lot of it, unlimited energy which can be directed if you know how. That's easy to say that. But do you understand what I'm saying? There's unlimited energy available in the universe.
Sure. I think the best person to comment on that would be John, if John's still there. John?
Very good. John Hutchison.
Well, there's been a lot of research into the zero-point energy, tapping into it and using it to power systems and that. I mean, a cubic foot of that is equal to powering the Earth's energy needs for 100 years. And actually, it's called the Casimir effect. If people want to search out that type of information, it goes way, way back in time. And already there's a patent on a device in 1996 for a collection of zero-point energy to be used. And oddly enough, and interestingly enough, IBM has bought up all the patent rights to that device. And I've had my own experiences with building these machines myself when they would suddenly go up to 75,000 volts and turn into a dangerous situation.
Yeah. I was just sort of add to the tail end of that a person that John and I both know, Nick Cook, he has looked at this zero-point energy and how it ties into the anti-gravity and levitation effects. And going back to the pyramids, who knows, what they had then? Did they have access to this sort of technology? Another interesting topic for people just to quickly look at is Coral Castle in Florida, which was built by Edward Lead Scarlnin. That's a very interesting story, which I won't dwell on here, but a lot of people have linked that with the construction of the pyramids. I don't know if you've heard about that, John Lee.
Oh yes, I have, actually.
Sure.
That was a topic brought up on Coast to Coast, and also a lady friend of mine was giving me information on it. Very intriguing place, really fascinating.
Yeah. And maybe we can go to the next caller.
Good morning, caller. How are you today?
Hey, what's going on, Ambrose?
Hey, now. What are your questions?
I was going to just go on one of the earlier callers. Just the way that I see life, man, is, if he really knew the true nature of reality and the world that he living around you, you would really know. In reality, man, it's really no such thing as science fiction, really.
That's
Anyway, y'all have a good day.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that's a very good point.
Good morning, caller.
Yes, hello.
You're on.
I just wanted to make a comment that, and how you doing, Ambrose?
Oh, pretty good.
Listen, all this I'm hearing, I've heard this on Art Bell, and I'm just want to tell the callers in D.C. that you want to know the covert, underhanded stuff that the government's doing, the Air Force and all that, to listen to Art Bell. But what I wanted to also say is that once the government unveils all of their hidden, stuff, we will still be slaves. And we will still be under the thumb of this technology. So I just, saying, yes, it's amazing, but we need to have our own science kits so we can make our own spaceships and all that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Good morning, caller.
Good morning. I had a question in regards to the topic this morning as far as the concept that was delineated earlier. Is that related to continuous electron beam acceleration, to the metallurgy assay of the steel understructure of the building? And 3, could you elucidate on the cooling effect that you mentioned with the cloud of dust in the aftermath, or do you think that may have just been the internal temperature of the building being amplified at the ground level? Those are my questions.
Well, I don't know really how to answer that in terms of the technical aspects of the electron beam or technology that you referred to. It's not something I can answer. Maybe John,
Judy and Hutchison.
John would like to comment, and Judy then maybe about the dust cloud. John?
Oh, yes. Sorry about that. I thought Judy was going to... Well, there's particle beam weaponry and various types...
Speak up a little louder.
Yeah, I guess the line is fading here a bit. There is, a lot of research into particle beam weaponry, directed energy weapons, as well as devices to turn material into, dust. And... it's interesting about the cloud, and there's been reports in scientific data on temperature drops and this kind of effects in that.
Okay.
I have it in writing and documentation form.
Oh, that you have seen that before.
I've come across that literature in books, and when we test our samples, when you run in there right away and perhaps grab it, it's like ice cold.
Wow.
Yes, no heat involved.
I was wondering if some of the energy comes out of the object, and that's why it cools.
A valid point. It's like scientists I know who mentioned that when a woman lifts a car off her child, let's say, the temperature drops all around her. That's getting into the parapsychological stuff, which is a lot of research is going on right now into that region of parapsychology and energy.
Wow.
So
That's where the energy might be coming from, is the surrounding area.
Mm-hmm. That's possible.
Neat.
I've come across that literature on the drop in temperature in various topics like that. And I felt it myself, like a cold, cold wind. And oddly enough, we used to keep, in the hot summer, keep cool by this cold wind.
Ooh. I have read some of the transcripts of the first responders who, when the buildings went away, have described their temperature being cooler.
That's interesting. And then I would fall in the categories of some of the researchers I know that are doing interesting things and taking measurements in that.
It's interesting, the similarities and consistencies.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Okay, so maybe we can go to the next caller.
Good morning.
Hello?
You're on.
Oh, okay. How you doing, everybody?
Fine, thank you. Great.
Well, my comment is this. We know that the Pentagon is the one agency, if you want to call that, in the government that never seems to have its budget cut, yet they're the one agency that can't ever account for how all the money is being spent. So maybe we know where it's going now.
I think that's an absolutely valid point, and I believe it was September the 10th, 2001, there was an announcement that I think something like $1 trillion had gone missing, and they couldn't do their accounts to work out where it had gone. I believe that question was also posed by Cynthia McKinney at some point after September the 11th. Yeah. And John, I believe that you had dealings with the Pentagon at some level. Maybe you just want to mention that briefly.
Well, I have a fan club there. I'm not kidding. My video was shown there a couple of years ago, and it got a standing ovation from 400 officers. But I imagine the money that's gone missing is really just black ops. That's the secret government scientists and folks. Like, I was a member of that for a short time, and it's cash under the table and secret projects that I feel have to be done, or else it might get caught, with a big problem. That is mostly black ops stuff. And, it's a huge industry, the military-industrial complex, and in the USA and also in the Soviet Union and other locations. So a lot of money is pumped into such things.
Yep.
And unaccountable money, of course, is the black operations folks.
Absolutely, and it's something that Eisenhower warned about in 1961 in his leaving address.
Yeah. Good morning, caller. Oh, pretty good.
And your guest, how are you this morning?
Fine, thank you very much.
Yes, I'm kind of amazed at the nonchalant attitude everybody's taking about this crime of unimaginable proportions perpetrated upon American people and the world. I'm saying that this type of crime was so horrible and so shocking that most of the people are still in a mass hypnotic type state. I'm thinking that these revelations that we're hearing this morning should have the people so excited and so outraged enough that they should be flooding the lines to their congressmen and the newspapers and trying to get this message out as the #1 story of the year, that maybe will prompt some kind of investigations so that we can get to the truth behind who's responsible, and so we can bring some closure to the families of the victims, because they never got satisfaction for what happened when the government had its own self-investigated for these crimes, and then blame these crimes on other people, and we got hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people dying all over the world now because of this deception perpetrated upon American people. I'm so outraged, I'm almost breathless. But my question is, why are we not being instructed on how we can bring some more attention to this problem and contact other people that we may bring this to the forefront and get into some kind of investigations?
Well, we're going to tell you that. We're going to package these two shows and make it available so you can have meetings at your house, meetings in your neighborhood, where you can reveal it to a lot of more people than are hearing it now.
Thank you, Ambrose. That was obviously absolutely wonderful as far as we're concerned, and I'm glad the caller has reminded us, very well of why we're here, and really, my ability here is just to share the information and try and explain it. I've been, making discs, giving out discs, speaking to people, giving out leaflets. Everyone can try and do at least some of those tasks, continually. So, that's one of the things we can do. As you know, Dr. Wood and Dr. Reynolds have got the legal cases and the challenges to NIST. Anybody who's listening in this area who has, legal skills and wants to take this up, I'm sure, if you contact Dr. Wood or Dr. Reynolds and want to start your own legal action, I think that will be possible. And also, really, one of the things I strongly wanted to say, and I'm glad the caller again has reminded me, if there is anybody listening who knows anything about what we're talking about, take some action. if they're on the inside and they're listening and they want change, then make the change. Help make the change. We're just ordinary citizens, and particularly me being in the UK, I'm even more out on a limb. So, really, it's up to us to take whatever action we can. We can't rely on government agencies to do it for us, because we've been doing that for 6 years, and I think, as the caller pointed out very well again, nothing has happened.
Mm-hmm. Let's take one last call. Call, you're on.
Hi, good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
And your guest. My question is, I've seen on television that the Army is touting a weapon that they have. When they point it at individuals, they get so hot, they drop whatever they're doing, and they run away. And I was wondering how this relates to what your guests are discussing now. Thank you.
I believe you're talking about the active denial system, what they're calling. That it causes people, it's like if you put your hand on the burner of a stove, you're not going to think about it. Your hand's just going to be taken off of it. And making people feel that they're burning up makes them move a particular direction. They don't even get to think about it. They just run the other way. And there's going to be more and more things like that, I believe, that we'll be seeing.
And Judy, it's not a new technology. Some of the other experiments done in the 40s were infrasound, and some of the people actually died from that machine. Discontinued, but maybe reincorporated in another project. But that was a long time ago. But interesting stuff. I mean,
John, you're fading on me again. I'm going to give each one of you a minute to wrap up. We'll start with Hutchison. Speak loudly.
Aye, sir. Yeah, the line goes down. Well, it's been a pleasure to be on your show, and I'd love to see the entire mystery of 9/11, the most horrible day I ever encountered in my life, to be solved, and resolution for everybody, really. And the truth, the main thing is the truth.
Yeah.
That's the main thing, I feel, is the whole truth, what really happened, presented in a proper way and looked at. And thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you so much for being with us and joining us. Andrew?
Well, thank you again, Ambrose. Thank you to John very much for coming on and, I think, discussing something which is very difficult, particularly for John in his situation. We're very grateful indeed to John for everything he's done to help us in the last few weeks in kind of building up to this radio appearance. And again, I'd just like to reiterate, we are at a juncture now where we have the access to the energy technology. We don't need most of the, if not all of the energy sources that we use at the moment are out of date, they're obsolete. The sort of technology that John has been doing his bit to bring to the world and get them interested in, we all need to bring that to the attention of the officials the best we can, and if they don't do anything about it, then we're going to have to make a different plan, whatever that is. That really, again, copy the discs, get the DVDs, get the information, discuss it, share it, ask questions. That would be my closing comments.
Thanks so much, Judy. Dr. Judy Wood.
There's a friend of mine who quotes Robert Weir, I forgot the other person who coined this phrase, "The future is here. We're on our own." It's up to us to see to it that we do continue to have a future. And I think it's important to us to think for ourselves and not be herded, but to open our eyes and just look at what we see, what we think, what we feel. And I'd also like to thank John for coming on the show today, as well as Andrew. It's been great.
And thanks to you, Judy, as well, for everything you've done. It's been, historic, really.
Thanks to all three of you, and we are we're so grateful that you've decided to share this information with the general public. we're going to make sure that these 2 hours, last Friday and today, are made available to the people so that the people can share it and act in their own best interests. Thank you once again. This has been We Ourselves. I'm Ambrose Lane Sr. We'll see you again on Friday. Take care.